Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, What Happened at Microsoft Ignite 2024. I am your host, Bill Sutton, along with another member of the new member of the XenTegra family, Andy Sulak. We'll get to introductions in just a second. I'm going to move the slides forward there. One more. So here are your panelists for the day. Myself, Bill Sutton, the Practice Director of Modern Workspace. Our CEO was planning to be here, but got called away, so Andy Whiteside will not be with us. He sends his regrets. And then also, I want to introduce Andy Sulak, our new Microsoft Practice Director for XenTegra. Andy, you want to say hello to the folks on the call?
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. Great to be here, and looking forward to doing a bit of a download from Microsoft Ignite this past November in Chicago.
Yep. Next slide. Thanks, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to start off with kind of a who is XenTegra. And for those of you on the call who know who XenTegra is, this will go pretty quick. And then we will move into the content after a few obligatory introductory slides. So real quick, XenTegra LLC has been in business since 2012, so 13 years now. We're a teenager. We have a number of other sister companies that we work with, XenTegra Canada, which is our nearshore company. They are a standalone organization that serves the needs of customers in Canada, but can also be leveraged for overflow for services for XenTegra LLC. Same goes for XenTegra India, also known as our offshore subsidiary. Again, they do in-country sales and services, but can also be leveraged for offshoring. XenTegra One is our SMB business based out of Las Vegas. It focuses on customers with 250 users or less. And then we have a full-featured MSP at XenTegra that handles support contracts, managed services, backup as a service, DR as a service, lots of other things that are managed as a service by that practice at the company. So our mission, real quick, to engage, listen, and deliver the appropriate enterprise technologies to clients of all sizes. So engage, listen, and deliver, that's really part of our mode of operation. We work with all kinds of companies, from small organizations all the way up to big enterprises, and this motto or this mission follows our involvement in all of those, and kind of surrounds our VAR 2.0 model, which I'll talk about in a second. So we are a value-added reseller. We like to refer to ourselves as kind of a value-added reseller 2.0, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So we sell hardware and software, and we also perform strategic consulting services, as you can see on the screen. So our consulting services are add-ons to all of the things that we sell. We can do implementation, we can do architecture, design, we can help you roll out solutions, get those solutions implemented, help train your users, train your administrators. All of those types of things fall under the strategic consulting services umbrella. Managed services, just what it implies, and I touched on it a minute ago. These are provided for all of our areas. Digital workspace environment in particular, we can host your Citrix environment or your AVD environment. We can also manage those environments for you. You can host them on site, and we can manage them. We can provide support contracts for pretty much all of the technologies you see at the bottom. Obviously, our goal here is to make sure that your environment runs efficiently and effectively. And one of the other things we do is provide complimentary assessments for a number of our environments. You can find those on our website. The assessments that we do, these are typically about 4-hour assessments that result in a spreadsheet that details strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. One thing I do want to point out is in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide here, our business model, which is different than the mission, is to build a community and serve that community. So all of you who are on this call are a part of this XenTegra community. And so it's our goal here to serve you and to involve you in as many activities that we do, marketing activities, meetups, webinars like this one, formalized lunch meetings or dinner meetings where we go over a specific technology or group of technologies. All of these things you can find at XenTegra.com/events. Go ahead. And then here's the value add, VAR 2.0. So I mentioned the complimentary assessments. We also do educational webinars like this one. hands-on workshops. We're doing a number of these in the coming months. One of the key ones is around Azure Virtual Desktop and Nerdio that will be coming up, I believe, in March. We'll have a couple of those sessions in the Carolinas. And then we're doing some around liquidware, and we'll be doing others around Citrix and other technologies. Again, XenTegra.com/events is where you can find the details on these. Excuse me. We also do vendor-focused podcasts across pretty much every vendor that we represent. We do podcasts around iGel, around Citrix. We're revamping the one around Microsoft AVD. We do them around Fortinet and security and networking and modern applications. So we do a lot of podcasts. So just search for XenTegra on your podcast delivery source of choice, your delivery source of choice. Yes, that's hard to say. And search for XenTegra there and subscribe, if you will, please. And then lastly, but certainly not least important, is we also offer our customers under the VAR 2.0 model, and not necessarily just customers, could be prospects, heavily discounted conference passes. We took a number of customers, I think it was somewhere around 15, to Microsoft Ignite this year under our discounted conference passes. So if there's a conference that you'd like to attend that's specific to our industry or security, networking, digital workspace, what have you, go to XenTegra.com/conferences and sign up there and attend a meeting with one of our sales folks. And then you might qualify for a pass that's at least at most 90% off to a conference of your choice. That's all I have from an introductory perspective. I'm going to hand it over to Andy Sulak now to cover the core of the content, which is what happened at Microsoft Ignite back in November of 2024. Andy, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Okay. So there's a bit to go over. I'll start with a few kind of housekeeping issues. One, it's going to be a bit of a download. That's more or less on purpose, not to inundate you. And this is still just I would say a snapshot of what was presented and communicated at Microsoft Ignite in Chicago in November. If while I'm going through it, you have any questions, please send them through in the chat. It might fall into one of three buckets. One, we can probably answer them in line, especially if it's a clarification on something that I'm going through in the moment. Two, we might save it for the end. We'll also have a little bit of time at the end for questions. Or three, we might need to follow up and get you that information and get back to you on that. So these are the main areas that I'm going to be going through, which is still a lot with regards to Microsoft, but we'll see how this goes. So, all right. If you've been following Microsoft, I'm sure you haven't heard enough about Copilot. So here's a bit more. But if for those of us that were at the conference, it was very much focused on AI and Copilot. So I'm going to mention a little bit about what Copilot is. The other thing I should mention too, some of my slides can be a bit of information. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I want to make sure that if you want to, when you get the download later, you still have information on them. So some of them are a bit busy, but that's mostly for you afterwards, just so that you have that information to reference. My plan is not to read through each one. So talking about Copilot, if you've installed Windows 11, Copilot's there. And a lot of questions I've been getting recently is, well, what is Copilot? How are people supposed to use it? What are the differences? And names change all the time. So with the regards to the names changing as well as changes, I have a chart here, which gives a little bit of a comparison with ChatGPT if you've been using that tool, which the open AI language models are actually used by Copilot. So if you're in Windows 11 and use Copilot, you can, query for, web information, generate content. There's some data protection with that. That's what you get, we'll just say, with Windows. You're not paying for any additional license. When you're then moving into what's now called Copilot Pro until they potentially change it again, that's where you have you're allowing Copilot, or your organization with a monthly license is allowing access to the data that you have. So that would include accessing your emails, your chats, documents, calendar events, meetings, content, contacts. And so you can interact with them. You can query and use tools, uh, especially the Microsoft Enterprise apps like Excel, Outlook, Word, for example, to do custom work and queries, create things for you so you don't have to learn macros in Excel, or you don't necessarily have to know how to do brilliant design in PowerPoint. It can do that for you using your data that you have access to, and that's provided via the Microsoft Graph API. We can always go into a deeper session about that later, but I just wanted to give that breakdown of what the Copilot is that's probably already on your Windows 11 system versus what the Copilot Pro that you would pay for. And then some of the new things that Microsoft uh, announced and rolled out with Ignite around more specific workflows. I think one of the big questions that's always asked regarding any kind of, well, most AI tools and Copilot is, well, what can I do with it? And then the answer is generally, well, what do you want to do with it? Which is doesn't really help us get anywhere generally. So what Microsoft is focusing on is, and I'll talk a little bit more about agents in just a moment, but focusing some of the tasks that you can use Copilot for. So it's a little more relevant. So there's Copilot for sales, there's Copilot for finance, which is going to have a little more focused um, workflows and tasks that are like, oh yeah, I'd like to be able to do that automatically. I'd like to be able to pull all these data sources and generate this report or do these functions. So that's a lot of what was announced overall, in addition to the security and compliance improvements, and I'll say approach, because one is, hey, you have access to all this data. So your staff can do all kinds of great productivity things, but then the question is, well, what access do they have? Do we know what they have? And what are they, potentially doing with it? So there's a lot of compliance and security updates around that to try and ease that, because when it comes to using AI and your own data within your organization for any of the tools like Copilot, it's, well, who has access to what can they get to, and what are they doing with it? So Microsoft's trying to actually kind of zero in on that a bit, which is nice. And that's where the agents come in, where you can build specific work. I like to think of agents as workflows. It's AI that has been AI, instead of just a chatbot to say, ask it to do a myriad of different tasks. It's more focused on, maybe industry specific, they're rolling out industry specific templates for finance, healthcare, retail. That might be the top 5 to 20 workflows that is important to specific roles within that industry. And then allowing you to connect into Microsoft Power Platform as well, if you want to enhance the reporting, get a little bit more out of it, but also, again, improving on the security and controls around this for data protection, governance, and then lifecycle management. Because one of the, well, one of the challenges / opportunities for AI is you can index and reference a lot of data, but what is good data versus relevant data versus duplicate data, and those are all things to take into account that Microsoft is really working hard. I would say probably in my opinion, and not only because that's the focus of this webinar, but probably working hard to ease the onus on customers and the end user to figure everything out. There's still a bit that needs to be done, and those are things that we definitely would like to talk to you about if that's a big question in your mind. But Microsoft's definitely moving that forward with the different aspects of Copilot and the agents. So I'm going to give you a little rest from that as we move into couple of other areas of updates from Microsoft. One is around their Windows 365. So this is their cloud PC. Um, if you're not familiar with Windows 365 as a cloud PC, I think a lot of people get it confused with just, oh, that's Microsoft 365. Those are the licenses I pay for. Well, that is the licensing of certain services within the platform. But Windows 365 specifically is a is a desktop instance that is generated and served up in Microsoft's cloud. It's really, I like to consider this an out-of-box um, virtual desktop, but I'm gonna kind of compare that with Azure virtual desktops in a moment here. So I want to give updates around it, but not confused. But some of the things that they're allowing for is, or hey, big surprise, integration with Copilot for productivity, giving you a bit more control policy-wise through Azure Active Directory or Entra ID and Intune. So giving a little more flexibility because it is meant to be kind of an out-of-box. You log in, here's your credentials. Hey, here's your desktop. What's on the desktop? Well, the uh, basic productivity tools that you have licenses for. That's slowly being enhanced, and then improvements on the security side regarding Microsoft Defender and focusing more on the zero trust architecture that they're pushing across all aspects of security. So updates on that, and then as compared to Azure Virtual Desktop. So this is the full virtual desktop platform where you create your images, you generate the desktops, you manage them, you deploy to them, and then you make them available to your staff and employees. So they're extending the platform on this from a management perspectives, doing a bit more with auto scale. So since it's running on Azure and Azure resources are a cost, using auto scale to flex for when you need more resources, more desktops. Maybe it's based on time of work, shift workers. That can optimize a lot of the available resources and costs to you, which is of course a concern when it comes to cloud computing. A bit more deep insights as to how the desktops are, what resources they're using, what the user experience is, a bit more diagnostics, and then also allowing you to generate more workflows as well as expanding support for more specific desktops that might have, high GPU requirements, whether it's graphics rendering or, AI development, because that's becoming more and more prevalent within. And just as a little bit of a side by side, even though this isn't necessarily an update from Ignite, I think it's good to just level set on the differences. If the last couple slides I went through are like, okay, that sort of makes sense, but hopefully this clarifies the difference between the cloud PC as more of a SaaS service versus the virtual desktop, which are hosted desktops that give you the flexibility and control, but you also have with that with the ability to build them, deploy them, and manage them. There's generally a little bit more work and expertise that needs to go into them. And if any of these are areas where you're interested in and might see a need for, these are both areas that we focus on at XenTegra. Happy to have a follow-up conversation with you. So I'll put Bill on the spot. When you kind of sum up the difference between Windows 365 and AVD, how do you usually think of that, or what comes to mind for you, Bill? I'm going to put you on the
Well,
spot a little bit.
no, it's okay. A couple of things. The one-to-one relationship associated with Windows 365, and that is, you've got access to one device. It is like a persistent desktop, so everything you save on that desktop stays there. That's an advantage, obviously, because when you log out, if you log in from another location, this kind of is the promise of roaming and those sorts of things. You get you get back to the same desktop that you have. The challenge is, it's a relatively expensive service, because you're paying for a, 100% up PC, in a sense, in the cloud. It's a SaaS service, so Microsoft manages it. There's some things you can do about getting apps on it and joining it in, as it says there, into Intune, and able to manage them to some degree. But to get the more granular control over your desktop, you need something like Azure Virtual Desktop, which is more of a platform service. So that's one of the key differences, and one of the things we talk a lot about. The other one is, again, and I touched on this, is the pricing. Windows 365 Cloud PC is a per user per month, fixed cost, if you will, whereas
Mhm.
AVD is more consumption based. So really, if you need the capability of being able to have multi-user or pooled type solution, then AVD is your go-to. If you want a one-to-one relationship with the desktop to the endpoint, or not necessarily one-to-one, but one desktop for the user that they can access from anywhere, you could do that in AVD, but you'd have to leave it up all the time, and the cost would likely be higher than if you did a Windows 365 Cloud PC. At the end of the day, what we're seeing is a lot of customers are doing a blend. They may
Mhm.
do a Windows 365 Cloud PC for executives and maybe some key staffers, but then AVD is the call centers and the kind of the task workers and those sorts of things. We've seen a lot of that. We also see third-party solutions leveraging Azure Virtual Desktop as well, that work in concert with 365.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks. Great points, especially highlighting the difference between the fixed cost per user per month versus the consumption based and the different usage scenarios. And um, the unfortunate but very applicable term of, well, it depends, and being able to
Right.
flex with what's right for each organization, and then also divisions and departments within each organization. So
Exactly.
thank you for that. All right. So along the lines of, there were some device announcements at Microsoft Ignite as well. One of them, it was the Windows 365 Link device. And I first saw the picture, I was like, hey, it's my Apple TV, which I'm sure Microsoft loves to hear. But it's about that same size, small device. It is specifically designed to plug it in, hook up a monitor, hook up your input devices, and then connect to your Windows 365 cloud PCs. To be clear, it is designed for that. So doesn't have the flexibility of other thin clients or other devices that are on the market, but it is purpose built and just I did go and see an actual hands-on demo. You just, like, out of the box, plug it in. It has a very thin and light operating system on it, which is really just enough to connect up to the Windows 365 tools in up in Azure, and really works great. If that's the specific need. So cool if it's the right fit, which is generally a guiding principle with a lot of technology. It's the availability is slated for April, and as it stands right now, $349 for as an MSRP for cost. So moving along lines with that, also the Microsoft Copilot laptops, they were announced a little bit before Ignite, but then they definitely expanded the information regarding them. So I would say the way that I sum up the Copilot devices, or the Copilot ready devices, is that they are equipped with CPUs that also have NPUs, which is neural processing units. Not that different from GPUs. That this is actually in addition to a GPU, but it allows for the onboard processors to work on more AI related tasks. So initially, if you're thinking, well, okay, what do I do with it right now? Uh, which was my question too when they first came out. If you're doing development and you want to create your own language model. I won't say an LLM. It's really more of an SLM because you're doing it on, locally, a small language model versus a large. You can actually use those neural processing units to create your own and develop your own, chatbots, or which is just very popular thing that a lot of organizations are kind of starting with right now. But allows you to do that processing locally versus, having to pump that out to using cloud resources or other things like that. So as time goes on, and I would say actually probably quarter by quarter from Microsoft, there will be integration to actually use functions within Copilot Pro, but have that processing be done locally, which will be a lot faster, be less reliant on the network, and allow the expansion of the capabilities of those. So that's all fits into the roadmap with that. And so another thing to note generally, or not specifically, but right now the Copilot PCs from Microsoft are running ARM processors. And I just bring that up because there are Intel processors that have NPUs, but just be aware of that when it comes to certain applications that you might be running, because it is Intel architecture versus ARM processors. So, and then extending the device portfolio, still within the Surface line, but this is where you get into the Surface Pro X, which is a bit more of a high-end workstation. Your Surface Laptop Studio 2, which also falls along that. And then your Surface Hub 3, which I think is an interesting new development where I said this to a Surface Hub specialist while I was at Ignite. I was like, oh, so that's a pretty cool digital whiteboard. And that did not go over very well. But that was essentially how I kind of interpreted that. That's what the Surface Hub 3 is more for like Teams collaboration within, conference rooms, but also extends and provides solutions for hybrid work collaboration, so people can be in person, also remote, and it ties together a lot of the functions that they're building in to support more hybrid work solutions. So those are the device lineups. A couple other things that you may or may not have been aware of. Microsoft Edge for Business. So you're probably familiar with Microsoft Edge because it's, the latest Microsoft browser that shows up on Windows and has been there for a while. Edge for Business is really, it's using Microsoft Edge as a browser, but what it's doing is allowing you to create a SaaS portal for your applications, which some of them are probably going to be Microsoft applications, and that could be, your Microsoft Enterprise apps that you're using through a web interface, through the browser, in addition to um, consolidating and getting access to other SaaS apps that you might be using outside of the Microsoft realm, but in a controlled, uh, controlled and governed interface. So there's a lot of tools that Microsoft Edge for Business allows you to do regarding getting access to company data through a browser. There's policies that can be applied to it, so only certain data can be accessed based on maybe it's your company device versus a kiosk in a hotel or something like that. A lot of again, big surprise here, a lot of the Copilot function is being integrated more heavily into Microsoft Edge for Business. What I what I see Edge for Business is if most of your apps are SaaS, or you have a a certain, I'll say, a critical mass of staff or users that don't need full desktops, and most of the work they do, tasks, knowledge workers, most of the work they do is through SaaS apps. Actually, just using Edge for Business is a great way to control, monitor, and support access to those applications while still maintaining security, governance, and compliance. If it's something that you're interested in, of course, we're happy to follow up on that. And Microsoft has been kind of, I'd say, a little quiet about this in the past, but they're starting to bring this more to the forefront. And that kind of fits into the continuum with, you have Edge for Business, then maybe into Windows 365 Cloud PC, and then into Azure Virtual Desktop, creating that or expanding that continuum of um, end user staff access to applications, data, uh, AI tools, and doing it in a secure and compliant way. A little bit more in Edge for Business. There's a lot of they've expanded the IT admin controls of Note, and then allowing you to do branding. Um, you can, also do some of the controls via Endpoint Manager, Intune, and they're expanding the interface to reduce the edge cases where it's like, boy, 90 to 95% of what I need is something I can really do through a browser, but it's that last 5 or 10% that I really need a desktop app for. They're pushing forward to try and close that gap for as many organizations as possible, because at the end it's a bit simpler, and then a consolidated interface. So even from an end user compute, end user experience perspective, it definitely has a good fit in many organizations. Again, going back to the it depends perspective. So, all right, and then coming into security, a lot of, I mean, there were so many security updates uh, that I just have uh, just 2 slides on this, believe it or not, and whether we realize this, this was actually mentioned to me a couple of years ago, and it's definitely come to fruition, is that Microsoft is the largest technology security company out there by far. Now, granted, that's taken their entire um, market share and applying it to that, but uh, not only because of that, but because all of their push to the cloud and now extending that with AI, uh, securing the securing the access, preventing bad actors is of prime concern. So they're expanding what they've improved along Entra, which is their Microsoft Azure Active Directory. I'm getting better at calling it Entra, but I still slide back into Azure Active Directory. Continuously expanding Defender on all platforms, whether it's what's on your endpoint or actually being used within a lot of the platform services. And then expanding the policy automation, and then evaluating the security. So there's a big push around AI. Actually, this has been going on probably for really 5 to 8 years, but on the behind the scenes of using more AI tools for security to do continuous evaluations and then continuously learn from exploits that are being out there. This isn't necessarily anything that you specifically need to be um, concerned about, other than the fact that it's happening, and Microsoft is making huge investments in this, and then they're expanding that with the evaluation process, as well as putting more of that into Microsoft Sentinel. And then continuing along that, I mean, there's actually some more specific, and this is just, again, a snapshot of a few of the Microsoft Sentinel updates um, about, workbooks using AI for incident detection, and then also going into response tools, and then also expanding that last point there with purview capabilities, data classification with AI tagging. Going back to some of the first slides I had around using Copilot and the access that the AI engine has to your data, a big part of preparing for that is classifying and tagging your data within your organization, which is generally no small task. A number of companies, but notably Microsoft, is pushing forward with using more AI tools to ease this. It's not something that I would necessarily go along with, say like, oh, we'll just hit the next, and let AI do everything. But instead of it being a very onerous and high touch task to classify data, some of the tools that they're rolling out make it vastly easier and much more attainable for organizations of pretty much any size. And of particular, if, around regulations regarding GDPR, HIPAA, CCPA, around, among others, um, some great improvements on that front, because it's great to have AI tools, but the access to the data, the security around them is really neck and neck with priority of using those. So, okay, that was a lot of talking. So I'm gonna and break for questions. That's the download. Are there any if there's any questions that have come in, happy to take them, or if you want to take a few moments to kind of let that settle in, we can hang on for a few moments here.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So I don't see any questions in the question dialogue, and I did reach out in the chat just to see if anybody had any questions. So I'm gonna add a couple of things here real quick, if you don't
Sure.
mind, before we adjourn. But during that, if there's any folks have any questions or comments, feel free to drop in the chat or in the Q&A. So I wanted to double click a little bit on Edge for Business. I know you and I, Andy, talked about that.
Hmm.
And I think one of the key use cases for that is customers, and you alluded to this, of course. We have, historically, if we wanted to secure access to an application, and what I mean by that is we wanted to make sure that we couldn't allow downloads or we couldn't allow screenshots, things like that. The solution was often VDI or a virtual applications, like launching a published app, if you will, through
Hmm.
Citrix or some other means. And then we had the ability to effectively lock down access to that app from any, you couldn't download files to your local machine. You couldn't access the clipboard. A lot of those things have been brought into the browser now through Edge for Business and of course other browsers that are out on the market. Microsoft's answer to a lot of those third parties that have created their own secure browser is by expanding the use cases for Edge for Business. And
Hmm.
so you can do a lot of they call it table stakes, but a lot of the things that you can do in VDI, you can configure Edge that say if your users are on a non-corporate asset and they go to Salesforce, maybe you want to allow them to go to Salesforce, but you don't want to allow them to download anything. You don't want to allow them to upload anything. You don't want to allow them to cut and paste, maybe print. Maybe when you allow them to go to that web portal, whether it's Salesforce or whatever, ServiceNow maybe, they'll get a watermark. So if somebody takes a picture of their screen that shows who's logged in and what the IP address is and the date and time. So a lot of these things that we were able to control through the VDI or remote hosted applications, we can now leverage the browser itself for that. So it becomes kind of like the virtual desktop, if you will, on your physical desktop. That doesn't necessarily solve every use case, of course. It's really more focused on web and SaaS apps. If you've got a traditional 3-tier app, client server type app that you need access to, like in healthcare, certainly in financial services,
Hmm.
logistics, and other areas, then you may still have the need for a virtual desktop. And it's not to say the two can't run together, either independent of one another, or you can run Edge for Business within your virtual desktop to get the best of both. So I just wanted to double click on that and talk a little bit about what the use cases there, and we can certainly help you dive deeper into this if it's something that you're interested in.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bill. Great to dig into the details, because
Yeah,
some of the specific use cases you mentioned about securing data, preventing screen prints, copy and paste,
right.
and just clarifying, like, hey, just need access to your SaaS apps. It's a much more simplified way to do that, and I like again, I like the consolidated interface, kind of like the heads up display that a
Right.
portal provides for um, a lot of roles within different organizations. So
Yeah, but I mean,
good
let's
point.
let's face it. What's the most used application on a physical desktop these days? It's the
Mm.
browser,
Yeah.
right? For
Yep.
the most part. So,
Yeah.
um, but it's also probably the least secure application on the endpoint. So this is a way of curing that and having better control, even when the device is not managed by corporate.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts from what we went through, or?
No, I thought you covered it
Okay.
pretty well. So, and I don't see any questions. So,
Yeah.
any final thoughts, Andy?
All right. I'll just mention that if you know, because I know how this tends to work right after you get off a call, get off a meeting, get off a webinar, it's like, oh, that one thing that I thought of. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And
Mhm.
we went through a lot of topics, and we're looking for what's interesting to you to drill down into what's interesting, or what do you want or need to learn about, because any of these we could expand into other webinars focusing on Microsoft Sentinel or certain aspects of Copilot. I mean, even just doing a webinar on Copilot would still be
Right.
um, a huge undertaking. But please send those along and any other follow-up questions. Um, we're here for you, back echoing Bill's comments at the beginning. You're part of our community. We're here to support the community first and foremost. So please reach out, and looking forward to seeing you in upcoming webinars, as well as the other events that we have on our events page at XenTegra.com.
Right. All right. Thanks, Andy. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye.